Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I hope you had a pleasant lunch and enjoyed the side event. I call this meeting to order. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, we will continue with agenda item 3C, supporting migrant protection, integration, and contribution of development, addressing two objectives 14, 16, 19, 20, and 22. The third panel discussion will be ordered by Mr. Judd Trotman, Manager, Global Policy Network and Regional Program UNDP, Bangkok Regional Hub for Asia and the Pacific. May I please ask the moderator and the panelists of the roundtable discussion to take their seats in the sofa chairs. As a kind reminder, following each panel discussion and time permitting, there will be a few minutes for question and answer for any short question and remarks, not statement from the floor. Then the moderator will conclude the panel discussion, and then I will open the floor for statement. Since we have received many speaking requests already, the time permitting, I will call the stakeholders organization that have not yet spoken. Mr. Trotman, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Distinguished delegates, distinguished panelists, I welcome you to Roundtable 3 on supporting migrants' protection, integration, and contribution to development. The roundtable is organized by UNDP and focuses on GACM objectives 14, 15, 16, 19, 20, and 22. Allow me a few introductory words before I turn to my distinguished panelists. In addressing the challenges migrants are facing in the Asia-Pacific region, the past 5 years have demonstrated the importance of consular protection and ensuring that migrants, regardless of their status, can access healthcare, education, and legal assistance. Secondly, inclusive policies that recognize the rights of migrants in labor markets and social protection systems as crucial for integration and development. Thirdly, affordable and reliable channels for remittances and financial inclusion to support migrants and their families to help boost local economies in countries of origin. And cooperation between origin and destination countries to ensure the portability of social security benefits and building systems that promote long-term inclusion. Adequately supported, migrants play a vital role in strengthening community resilience and contribute to sustainable development, economically, socially, and environmentally. As the Asia-Pacific region navigates climate change, demographic shifts, and digital transitions, alongside potential shocks and crises, it is essential for destination countries to integrate migrants into national systems, economies, and social and political life, and for countries of origin to continue supporting migrants in hardship. For this third round table, it's neither really round nor really at a table, but I have three distinguished speakers who I'd like to introduce to you before addressing them with one question each. To my right, Mr. Alexander Bodiroja, who is the Deputy Regional Director of UNFPA for Asia and the Pacific. To my left, Ms. Inda Nuria Savitri, who is the Director of Human Rights and Humanitarian Affairs in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Indonesia. And to my very left, Ms. Asel Dunganeva, who is the co-founder of Women's Public Association JIPAR in Kyrgyzstan. Welcome to all three of you. Thank you for making time to be with our panel today. I'll have one question each for each of the panelists. We'll try to keep our responses relatively brief to be able to open up the floor for any immediate questions or comments from member states, stakeholders, and other participating colleagues right after. But I should also, as a moderator, take on the not so nice duty of being the timekeeper as well. I'm being reminded that we have very limited time for the panel. So by about 10 to 3 local time, we'll be concluding. Allow me, Mr. Bodiroja, to address the first question to you. Amid the demographic shifts in Asia and the Pacific, how have migrants contributed to sustainable development in origin and destination countries? How will their contributions evolve as the region navigates impacts of climate change and of green and digital transitions? If you can keep your response to about 6 minutes, we would be grateful.
No problem. Thanks a lot. Good question. Coming here, I was just thinking about something that the former United Nations Secretary General said years ago, that migration is not a problem that we are trying to solve, that migration is reality that we manage. And I'm just in responding to your question, I'm just thinking how much we evolve in addressing migration since that time. It is undeniable, and to do that, I will do that in a few points. Number one, you mentioned demographic shift. We are the Asia Pacific, time in which we live, and the region in which we live is the time and the region of the extremes. Some of the richest country in the world and some of the poorest country in the world. Demographic transition. We have right now 13 countries that are facing the challenge of the rapid aging, the low fertility, but on other end, we have a country that are still in the midst of the youth bulge with a high percentage of the population, among that most active one, young population, that are looking for opportunities outside of the country for employability and better life. This region represents, in the global numbers, 80% of all climate-induced move is in Asia Pacific. And I can go on and on and on. And that for all this reason, obviously, there is a very clear, straightforward link between what is happening in the region right now and migration. My second point is directly related to your question, how that contributes to the sustainable development. It is undeniable fact that migration, both to the origin countries and destination countries, significantly contribute to sustainable development. Just look at the numbers in this latest report. $450 billion contribution to the GDP, regional GDP. I think it represents some 6.5, or $350 billion in remittance. That's basically that amount alleviate poverty, strengthen the local economy. So that's economic aspects. But if you're looking at that from the anthropological perspective, there is also the issue of the cultural diversity that foster innovation. If you are looking at the issue of the knowledge, the migration is also strengthening exchange of the knowledge and skills in both origin and in the host countries by getting new skills, acquiring new skills, new knowledge, and basically transferring that in both ways. So by all means, there are significant link to the sustainable development. My third point is on something that is missing. From UNFPA perspective, it is not only about movement. It's about humans, about life, about their rights, and about their individual contribution to human development. If you are, again, going back to the numbers, out of 107 million migrants in this region, 48% are women. And 30% of those women, they don't have access to health services, and what is important for us, the sexual reproductive health services. Now, that puts them in extremely vulnerable position of being prey for exploitation. There is direct link between lack of access to unmet health needs, and by same proxy for unmet reproductive health needs. So the solutions are there, but I think we also have to think out of the box. We are working on health system strengthening, on universal healthcare coverage, but I feel that is still very much siloed. So we have to start process of desiloing. When we are advocating, we are really not advocating in isolation for separate thing, but looking at the issue of the migrants and their rights from the perspective of inclusiveness. And that is a key for the response. The third point that I would like to make is basically climate, and then in the context of moving the way we are looking at the climate move and the climate adaptation, and in this context, migrants from the perspective of recipients to actually active actors and players in the climate response. And it is a complex issue, but we have to start that process of integrating them as the key actors, particularly when it's coming the disaster risk reduction and how we are putting together climate adaptation programs and action. And I started by looking and talking about Ban Ki-moon, and I kind of challenge myself and challenge everybody to see how much we did evolve. For UNFPA, it's extremely important that by upholding and securing reproductive health rights of migrants, we at the same time upholding the principles of equality, compassion, and justice. That will uplift many lives of migrants, and that will look and initiate a new future and the way they are looking at the future and adjusting to that new future. Now, evolving part of that famous statement of Ban Ki-moon, again, he said it's not a problem that we are addressing, it's a reality that we are managing. I want to believe that we reach the point in which it is reality that we are embracing, that we are fully embracing in order to foster the future where each individual, migrants, regardless of a background, regardless of the circumstances that put them in that condition, can live fulfilling life. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bodiroja, and thank you for putting an emphasis on the kind of contributions migrants provide to origin and destination countries, to put a special emphasis on the vulnerability of women, as well as the dimensions of climate change and how they impact on the movements and migration we see in the region. Thank you very much for your input. Distinguished delegates, allow me to turn to our colleague Ms. Inda Nuria Savitri, Director of Human Rights and Humanitarian Affairs in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Indonesia. Ibu Inda, thinking about examples others can learn from, what specific actions have been taken to unlock greater contributions from migrants to sustainable development by ensuring stronger protections and better inclusion? Over to you, Ibu.
Thank you very much, Gert, Mr. Moderator. And again, of course, it is indeed a great honor for me to be here representing Indonesia. And again, we have discussed a lot of important issues for the last 2 days until tomorrow, and for sure supporting the works of our migrant workers, ensuring their protection, integration, as well as contribution to development are part of the priorities, and that's why we're here, to bring the real impact on the ground. Amidst all the challenges that we are still facing, of course, and some of the issues that we are still working on and addressing up until now, there are a lot of steps, initiatives, and programs that have been taken. I know that my time is not that much, but I'm trying to touch upon 4 big elements on this, starting from the specific programs and policies, national legislative framework, our bilateral, regional, and multilateral cooperation. And the last is, of course, the joint program for the migration governments for sustainable development in Indonesia, which is, I have to say, one of the best practices that we can share at this point. So touching upon the specific programs and policies, the government of Indonesia has been trying and striving to work on ensuring the protection of migrant workers at every stages, at every level, starting from the pre-departure, during the placement, as well as upon the return of the migrant workers. For the pre-departure, one examples of the concrete action that and programs that we have done is ensuring the establishment and the launching of Satu Data Migrasi International Indonesia, or one data international Indonesian international migration. You know, data is very powerful, and we all need a good, accurate, disaggregated one. Having a one integrated system working on all the data related to our migrant workers is a huge effort. And what we've been trying to work is trying to migrate all this data into one integrated system, data from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, from the Ministry of Law and Human Rights in this case, particularly the Immigration Directorate General, Ministry of Empowerment, and then we also have agencies, which is now turned into a Ministry for the Promotion of Indonesia's migrant workers, and even from Bank of Indonesia. So we're trying to integrate that to have a powerful system that definitely help create, formulate, and implement a targeted and right-based policies. We also continue to work on strengthening the capacity of our migrant workers through join training centers in many concentrated areas. We have one integrated service centers in many areas in Indonesia, and we are also implementing one channel system. I think this is something that have been shared among many of the GCM champion countries to ensure that we have cooperation with destination countries and with all the relevant stakeholders in Indonesia. We also work on the prevention of the trafficking in persons, because this is one of, sadly, unavoidable elements sometimes when it comes to the issue of migration. And there are many platforms, particularly through Bali process, that we are working within the Asia Pacific region. And still in the pre-departure level, the local governments are strengthened in terms of the capacity to ensure that they know their roles, their obligation to do their job, to work on the local regulations to ensure, again, the promotion and the protection of the rights of the migrant workers. For the placement itself, we are working on Indonesian Citizen Protection Portal. So we start that back in 2015, if I'm not mistaken, starting with the SMS blast, with all the using the technology, and then now we have the portal where we hope that not only in migrant workers but all Indonesian abroads are registering themselves through this portal, so we know where they are, we know their status. So if something bad happen, we can definitely extend our help and support and assistance. And of course, consular services and protection of Indonesian citizens is very paramount, and then we have that in all Indonesian embassies and Indonesian consular, as well as mission abroad. Upon the arrival, this is also something that we are trying to work more and more, because we try to facilitate the return of the Indonesian migrants, particularly those who are facing problems and obstacles due to many things, disasters, issue of conflicts, pandemics, and many others. But another thing that we are trying to expand at this point is the establishment of Desa Migrant Produktif, or in English, it's a productive migrant village. So we are trying to empower those who have returned to Indonesia. We are providing them with various assistance. It can be in terms of support for businesses, support for organization, so that they don't have to return to work abroad or go through the irregular path, for example, in order to get a better life. And they can also provide a lot of information, a lot of beneficial knowledge about work abroad. I mean, sometimes people think that working abroad is the best, working abroad is the answer to everything, which is actually not. it's not always be the case. So we are trying to empower many of the returning migrant workers, of Indonesian migrant workers, in the villages that we have. And along that way, we are also trying to empower many of the entrepreneurship of those returning migrant workers. And we work a lot with businesses, with training centers, with banks, with entities in order to work on that. And the Ministry of Empowerment, Ministry of Manpower, and Ministry of Promotion and Protection of Migrant Workers will be in charge for that. For the legislative framework, of course, many normative frameworks have been established through our national law, through our regulations, government regulations, regarding the protection of Indonesian migrant workers, on the implementation of the protection of Indonesia's migrant workers, including those in the fishery sectors. So this is something that the latest one that we are working on. If you notice, yesterday we touched upon the seafarers issues, and I think the Philippines delegation is also talking about the same thing. So we are trying to work and expand the promotion and the protection of the rights of migrant workers toward that particular areas. And through bilateral, regional, as well as multilateral, as you can see, we have many bilateral diplomacy being conducted. At this point, we have around 19 cooperation with different countries, and 13 new are coming on the way. And hopefully, it's not always been that easy. I think maybe many of our fellow states will share the same sentiments when we talk about bilateral arrangement. There will be there are a lot of parameters that we have to work on, and challenges are quite big in that case. But we will continue working toward that, strengthen many of our bilateral cooperation. Through the regional cooperation, we have ASEAN, and of course, in the Asia Pacific, we have Colombo process. And then through the for the trafficking in person, as I've mentioned, we have Bali process. So many platforms that have been used as well. And for the multilateral, we are here for the GCM and all its agenda and all its goals. We have been supporting since day one, and we sincerely hope that we can continue our work on that particular issues. And the last point that I like to share is the concrete cooperation that we have regarding the joint program for migration governance for sustainable development. So we have one of the programs called Migration Multi-Partner Trust Fund, or the MMPTF. I know that probably the same name has been used in different countries as well. But this joint program has significantly supports the government of Indonesia in strengthening the migration management capacity at the national and subnational level. This is important because national, we work a lot at the national level, but the subnational level, they are not always at the same level of understanding or comprehension in terms of the work and the role that they can play for the issue of migration. So for 30 months from January 2022 to June 2024, we have this MMPTF. It of course involves huge budget. And again, thank you very much for the support that we have from IOM in this case, of course, with the support of UN Women and ILO as well. There are 21 activities that we have done under the MMPTF. But some of the flagships that I'd like to share is, again, Satu Data Migrasi, that the launch of that One Data International Migration for Indonesia is a huge thing, because we are working with the Central Bureau of Statistics, trying to get all the necessary data. And this program has enabled us to have meaningful participation, consultation, and discussion with all the relevant ministries and development partners to get the cooperation and synergy, and at the end of the day, working on the policies. And we also have the Essentials Migration Management, or EMM 2.2. This is another program that we have done together under the MMPTF platform. So we have 2 batches of trainings involving government officials, in order to strengthen and enhance our awareness about the governance, the good governance of migration. So we talk about international commitments, we talk about Indonesia's priorities, and we talk about, again, roles and regulations that we have. We also develop national and local migration governance indicator assessment. This is important to know how far we've gone, what are the challenges, and then what next to be done. So having this indicator assessment, we have collected 98 indicators from 39 ministries and agencies related to 6 elements or 6 dimensions of good migration governance. So we have, from all of these indicators, we know where our strengths are and where our weaknesses are, and then who can do what, when we have to do what. So these indicators help us a lot in developing concrete measures and the necessary policies needed. We are doing that at the national level as well as the local level. So again, engagement with all relevant stakeholders, with our migrant workers, not only the government and the ministries or institutions, but also with our migrant workers, with their union, with their organization, with civil societies. They have been a huge and essential part of the project. So that might be some of the, I hope it's not too long, but thank you so much again from this opportunity, and I'd like to learn more as well from the others. And back to you, Gert. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ibu Indah. And thank you for really providing us with a very comprehensive overview of how you, from the government of Indonesia's perspective, go about data-related issues, how you integrate data into a comprehensive, easy-to-use system, the use of indicators you concluded with, but also how you cooperate at multilateral, regional, bilateral, and national, and then subnational level, which is indeed a very important aspect to add. So thank you for your intervention in this respect. Colleagues, allow me to turn to our third panelist, Ms. Asel Dunganeva, who is the Women's Public Association JIPA co-founder in Kyrgyzstan. Ms. Dunganeva, my question to you would be, how does migrant exclusion limit sustainable development, and what opportunities exist to maximize benefits of migration from your perspective? Over to you, Ms. Dunganeva.
Thank you so much. Excellencies, distinguished delegates and colleagues, I will speak using examples from my sub-region. I am from Central Asia, from the perspectives of migrant women. I am represented in Jipar from Kyrgyzstan, and also I am a member of Asia Pacific Forum on Women, Law and Development. And it's an honor to share insights on key issues, challenges, and good practices from Central Asia. Since 1990s, external and internal labor migration in Central Asia has become a vital part of life for many women, driven by economic and political instability, poverty, and high unemployment. The majority of labor migrants in Russia are from Central Asia. Since 2022, we work together to strengthen women migrants' rights organizations and their communities, particularly internal and returned migrants, using feminist participatory action research, which enabled them to document the systemic challenges faced by women migrants, develop migrant-led recommendations, and conduct advocacy for policy and legal reforms at the national level. Key challenges faced by women migrants include limited access to education, full employment, decent work, living wage, and social protection. Many women work in precarious conditions within the informal sector, such as agriculture, textile, services, and domestic work, without written agreements or social security. Upon return, women migrants continue to face challenges of readaptation and reintegration into their home countries, despite the fact that they bring valuable knowledge and skills to their communities, fostering productivity, job creation, and innovation. In addition, many migrant children struggle to integrate into schools due to registration and language barriers. Some good practices of engagement of women migrants' rights organizations and their communities with decision makers have led to some positive outcomes. For example, in Uzbekistan, the engagement with decision makers has led to a governmental decision to enhance professional education, support reintegration through employment and entrepreneurship, and improve cooperation with relevant ministries. Additionally, a state microfinance fund was established to support women migrants. Also, labor migrants can now register online for state services. Just recently, Kyrgyzstan took a significant step to adopting a new labor code, which introduced mandatory employment contracts and strengthened the role of trade unions. This labor code was developed based on public consultations. Additionally, in 2024, Kyrgyzstan ratified ILO Convention 190, becoming the first country in Eastern Europe and Central Asia to commit to eliminating violence and harassment in the workplace. However, to ensure effective policy implementation and protection of women migrants, strong monitoring and evaluation mechanisms are necessary. It's important to acknowledge migrants, particularly women migrants, as the main stakeholder and a valuable resource for GCM implementation, as well as policy reform on migration at national level. Their direct and meaningful participation remain crucial in achieving GCM objectives and measuring the progress implementation of GCM through migrant-led indicators. It's also important to recognize migration as a key factor for achievement of sustainable development goals and acknowledge migrants, both internal and cross-border, as a valuable resource for sustainable development. Aligning the implementation of the Global Compact and the SDG within the country of origin and destination may help in addressing challenges faced by migrants. Lastly, this opportunity Lastly, in this opportunity to advance GCM objectives, we call on member states and destination countries to sign, adopt, and ratify international treaties and conventions that safeguard the rights of women migrants, such as the International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers and Members of Their Families, ILO Convention 190, and ILO Convention 189 on decent work for domestic workers. Ensure that migrants have access to essential services, including healthcare, education, decent work, social protection, labor rights, social adaptation, and sustainable reintegration, regardless of their status, including internal migrants. Include migrants in poverty eradication initiatives, social protection programs, and universal health coverage. Ensure migrant children, especially girls, to be integrated into national education policies to ensure their future opportunities. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dunganeva, for giving us your insights and perspectives from Kyrgyzstan and Central Asia on the inclusion and integration of migrants, labor market-related issues, but also issues around social security systems, social assistance systems, rights, as you rightly pointed out, going all the way up to the ratification of conventions as a foundational piece of ensuring the rights of migrants. With this, I conclude this very brief and not so round table as yet, but to round it a little bit, I would like to invite member states, but also stakeholders and UN agencies present here in the room for any ad hoc questions or comments you may have. I'm advised that there is a point in time a little bit later for formal statements by member states. So at the moment, if you would limit yourself to ad hoc questions to the panelists, I would be grateful. I see the lady in the left from Japan first, and please do, since my eyes, as you can see, are not the very best, please do wave your participation sign if you can. Over to Japan, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, for giving me the floor. And then I really appreciate that you have mentioned, I cannot check the name, but you have mentioned about statistic on migrant. And then it is important to count and make statistic on migration, on migrants. And then also it was clearly mentioned in SDG indicator that all the indicators should be disaggregated by the migratory status. So For example, in Japan, we are trying to put nationality or status residence information in the existing statistics. For example, census vital statistics and also employment related statistic and for pension statistic. Yes, we are having nationality or status of residence information, but still, for example, health insurance statistics or other kinds of statistics, we are trying to persuade people to put this information so that without organizing a new statistic, you can always get the new information. So I'd like to know about Indonesian situation for this disaggregation of statistic by migratory status and then also other countries in the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Japan. I take it that this would be a question maybe best answered by Ibu Indah, who spoke to data and statistics eloquently. Before doing so, I would like to give the floor to the distinguished delegate from the Philippines.
Thank you very much. I just have some few comments about the different topics. So let me just start by climate change. We in the Philippines, we recognize that it is a topic that definitely resonates to us Filipinos, being hit by calamities, by typhoons, almost every other week or every week in some of the months. With regard to this, there is a specific institute in the Department of Migrant Workers that studies so that it will be evidence-based. So this is one of the topics that we are currently studying as one of the key drivers for migration. That's one. Number two, in terms of the negotiation of bilateral labor agreements, we are already incorporating the issue of just transition, green jobs, and we also want to enter into, and we are in fact doing that, green BLAs, green job BLAs with several other countries. On the issue of mental health, it's definitely one of the provisions that is well ingrained, especially in the Magna Carta for seafarers, the right to immediate medical attention, given that our seafarers are in the sea for long periods of time. In the issue of reintegration, the full cycle of reintegration from predestination to the country of destination, and eventually back, is one of the issues that we fully agree. We are currently in the process of, we have a partnership with both the ILO and IOM because of our colleague on ASEAN and regional collaboration, in the Convention on Protection of Migrant Workers and their families. So this is one of the things that we want to be implemented in partnership, of course, with ILO and IOM. We also have study visits, which is also a regional as good bilateral partners, sharing of best practices when it comes to labor management. So we have had the opportunity to host several countries that came to the Philippines when it comes to good labor overseas labor management, and together with Indonesia, this is also an opportunity for us different countries to share our best practices when it comes to labor management. And lastly, I would like to point out that specific to the different programs on sustainable reintegration we just signed, I think a few weeks back, inconsistent with the whole of government approach, with the Department of Trade and Industry, what we call a business literacy, financial literacy program on franchising, providing loans without collateral to our overseas Filipino workers so that they could be properly reintegrated into the domestic system. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the distinguished delegates from the Philippines. With no further request for the floor, I would like to give the opportunity briefly to the three panelists to respond. Ibu Indah, quite a number of complementary points between Indonesia and the Philippines. Maybe you would like to start also in response to Japan, and then I'd like to invite the other two panelists.
Thank you very much, Gerd. And again, thank you for the questions, comments, as well as the additional information. As the distinguished delegates from Japan correctly pointed it out, the importance of having this aggregated, accurate data is indeed very paramount. And we are working on that, Ibu, ma'am, that with the Satu Data Migrasi Indonesia, we are trying to get as much as we can in terms of these aggregated elements on that. So you are mentioning about health insurance, nationality, and some other additional details that we are also trying to work on. But for sure, as I have mentioned earlier, we are still in the process of integrating of that 5 main sources of data with regards to Indonesian international migrant workers. And then, of course, along the way, together with our Central Bureau of Statistics, we will complement the details and the additional elements needed for the disaggregated data. I think since the very beginning, and as we are also working on the data that we had from the previous national census. So it's an integration of almost everything. Again, it's a huge project. It takes a while. It takes some times for sure. And of course, we'll get back to you to provide the updates of the conclusion of that once it's done. And I also comment on many of the salient points highlighted by the distinguished colleagues from the Philippines regarding climate change and then the seafarers, then the importance of the reintegration processes and program. We do have similar approach, as you can say, that reintegration is important as that helps a lot in not only ensuring that the life and the rights of our migrant workers are fully protected and promoted, but for sure it's for the better life of everyone. They're members of the families. We are also state parties to the International Convention on protection of migrant workers and members of their families, and also some of the ILO convention on that. So I think it is also important to ensure that these obligations are not only understood, but that becomes sort of a guideline, sort of a important reference in order to work on the necessary policies needed for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ibu Indah. Mr. Budiroja, would you like to briefly comment on the two interventions from the Japan and the Philippines?
There was no very concrete question, but I really want to applaud Philippines. I mean, for a really comprehensive approach. I've been there last year. I met some of some of you. It's really it can be example on how the government is reacting to the challenges posed by the climate change, and how integrating the needs of internally displaced persons in their responses. So kudos for that. I think we have to look and pay attention on what is coming. If you're looking what happened last year in Pakistan, I mean, over $10 billion in damages as a result of epic floods. 25 to 30 million people on annual basis is moving as a result of the climate-induced disaster, and that number will increase year after year after year. So the preparedness is the key, and as a part of that preparedness, we should not, and that's why I mentioned that migrants have to be involved as an active player in all policy-making mechanisms, including in disaster risk reduction, because they are the one who know how to cope. They learn through the years and years in Philippines, particularly, how to cope and how to mitigate the risk of the climate change and climate adaptation. And that lessons learned can be really effective and used somewhere else. So for that reason, for the country, but also to replicate that lesson somewhere else is critical. Let me just, I know that we are out of the time, I would just ask one more time, and if you're looking, I was representative in Afghanistan, before that in Egypt, I saw firsthand what happened when there are no opportunities, when the young, particularly young girls, are forced to work and to be willingly being exploited as a result of the lack of opportunities and the system that will protect them. And having in mind that still in the region we have 10 million undocumented migrants, they are the most vulnerable population that we have on our hands, and we have to do our best to make sure that the services and provision of services is inclusive and offered equally to the domestic population, but also to the migrants.
Thank you very much, Mr. Budiroja. Ms. Dunganeva, would you like to comment briefly as we conclude our panel?
This year, at the high-level political forum, some countries will present voluntary national reports And my country, Kyrgyzstan, will also present a report using gender statistics. In my country, our National Statistical Committee collects data on achieving SDGs. But it's necessary to have gender disaggregated statistics on migration because there is no accurate data on migration. And also we have a national policy on migration till 2040, and we have activities on creating data in the frame of this policy. And Kyrgyzstan adopted GCM last year. It's recently, but my government developed action plan and provide negotiations with other countries of Central Asia and with, for example, Russia, how to provide changes and in our law legislation to implement objectives of GCM.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dunganeva. Distinguished delegates, at this point, also with always an eye on very critical chair behind or in front of me in terms of time management, I would like to conclude this roundtable panel discussion on supporting migrants' protection, integration, and contribution to development with a big thank you to my three panelists. And perhaps, if I may, invite you all for a round of applause for the panelists, and thank you all for your attention. Thank you all for your attention. I hand back to the chair, maybe behind me, but I can't see, frankly. Thank you very much.
I thank you, the moderator and the panelists, for introducing the topic of agenda item 3C. I now open the floor for statement from the floor. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I will open the floor for country statements. As we have limited time for intervention, I would like to urge all speakers to strictly adhere to the time limited of 3 minutes. So please sum up your key points that need to be raised. Delegate called upon will speak from the seat. The Secretariat has received speaking requests already, and we will also call on the government in the room which raise their flag. I will first open the floor for two statements from the members, associate members, and observer countries. I will then invite statements from the intergovernmental organizations, United Nations, entity, and the representative of stakeholders group. Since we have received many speaking requests already, and time permitting, I will only call the stakeholders organizations that have not yet spoken. I open the floor for statement. I now invite the distinguished delegate of Bangladesh to please take the floor, and followed by China. So please.
Thank you, Chair. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, and esteemed colleagues. Bangladesh is committed to implement the GCM objectives clustered in this thematic area, focusing on enhancing consular protection, assistance, and cooperation throughout the migration cycle to ensure that migrants have access to consular service and protection. Bangladesh is working towards ensuring that migrants have access to essential services such as healthcare, education, and social protection focusing on decentralizing services. We are focusing on leveraging the contributions of migrants and diasporas to sustainable development to this development. In this context, the government has initiated formulation of a diaspora policy. We have also simplified and have created awareness for sending remittance through formal channels. Bangladesh has also taken multiple other initiatives to improve the protection of migrants and enhance their welfare, particularly throughout the Wage Earners Welfare Board, which is dedicated to supporting expatriate workers and their families. Several initiatives have been initiated, including financial assistance in the form of death compensation and burial support, disability allowances, medical treatment costs, establishing a separate expatriate welfare bank where a low-cost fund is available for the returnees, educational support for the children of the migrants, mandatory insurance coverage, rehabilitation program support for returnee workers, financial assistance for female migrant returnee, then safe home facility for the female workers, pre-departure and arrival support, legal support. We remain committed to the supporting young migrants' protection, integration, and contribution to development through and more inclusive prospect and harmonious society, ensuring that migrants remain safe, orderly, and regular for all. Thank you.
Thank you for distinguished delegate from Bangladesh. The next speaker on my list is the distinguished delegates from China, whom I now invite to take the floor, and followed by Azerbaijan.
非常感谢主席，各位代表，我想分享以下3个观点。第一是中国政府加强领事保护、援助与合作。中国政府依法保护中国公民和法人的海外利益。2023年，我们制定了领事保护与协助条例，完善领事保护工作机制，维护海外同胞的安全和正当的利益，保障重大的项目和人员机构的安全。第二，我们为移民提供服务和便利措施。中国建设国家移民管理局移民事务服务中心，开展移民咨询服务，并为在华的定居人员提供社会融入服务，为在华的常住外国人提供工作、学习、生活便利化服务。我们支持地方建立特色化的移民事务服务机构，在全国重点地区建设省市级的移民事务服务中心，在外国人的聚居区建立移民事务服务站、各级服务中心和站点，为来华、在华外国人提供签证及工作证件的办理、政策咨询、语言培训、法律援助、文化交流等服务。特别要强调的是，2019年我们启动了在线的政务服务平台，该平台2024年为中外出入境人员提供查询等政务服务1.3亿人次。同时在2021年的4月，我们又上线了12367热线服务平台。2024年呢，这个热线受理了中外人员的咨询来电超过708万通，平均的满意率高达99.36%。第三， 我们充分发挥移民和侨民的作用。中国高度重视移民和侨民在推动国家可持续发展以及对外联结中的桥梁纽带作用，构建全面坚实的权益保障制度体系，充分激发移民和侨民在促进国家可持续发展发挥积极的作用。我的发言完毕，谢谢。
Thank you, distinguished delegate from China. Any other country representative to have the floor? Okay, so now I invite Azerbaijan to have the floor and will follow by any country if you raise hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, and esteemed colleagues. Actually, my colleagues from State Migration Service yesterday have already provided insights on Azerbaijan's effort under Agenda Item 2, which also reflected in the response to the guiding questions, which are posted in ESCAP websites. But I would like to highlight the key initiative, which can be considered as a best practices that align with objective of the Global Compact, namely Objective 14, mostly it's enhancing consular protection assistance, and Objective 21. The main project, dear colleagues, is our Istanbul project. Just to inform you, after armed aggression against Azerbaijan and the occupation of a fifth territory, it had profound impact on our country's socio-economic landscape. And in the face of this challenge, most of Azerbaijanis, particularly those who live in our Nakhchivan territory, migrated to the Republic of Turkey. And a significant number of these Azerbaijan nationals have since been found to be residing in Turkey without legal status, and some of them without any documents. And in response to this, the government of Azerbaijan has implemented an action plan to legalize the status. The Azerbaijanis who migrated to Turkey in the beginning of 19th. And to facilitate this process, interagency working group was established which make 12 visits to Turkey, each of them 10. And during this process, dear colleagues, Azerbaijan working group received application of more than 8,000 of Azerbaijans who lived there. And now, based on these applications, more than 3,700 passports were given to these citizens of Azerbaijan who live there without any legal status. And plus, just for your information, more than 700 people applied for determination of persons' affiliation to the citizenship. What does it mean? It means, dear chairs, that more than 700 people have never had any documents. So our government provided this with document, and following the success of initiatives, a similar process have launched to support the citizens of Azerbaijan in Turkmenistan. Of course, the number is not so much, but even among these people was citizens who have passports from USSR. So we legalize them, and now the working will underway in other regions of Turkey. And notably, all expenses was covered by the government of Azerbaijan. When I am saying expenses, it's only technical also, to bring them to location over transportation expenses. So we have another project, the repatriation of Azerbaijan citizens from Syria and Iraq, and so far we repatriated more than 500 citizens, and this process remain ongoing. In conclusion, dear colleagues, Azerbaijan reaffirms its dedication to international cooperation in ensuring the protection, dignity, and well-being of migrants. I thank you all.
I thank you so much, Azerbaijan. Are there any other government which want to make statement? As I see no other requests from government, I will now open the floor for the intervention from the intergovernmental organization and the United Nations entity. So start by the first speaker on my list is a distinguished representative of OHCHR, and followed by Migration, Youth and Children Platform. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The contributions of migrants around the Asia-Pacific region to the development of their host countries and to their countries of origin are immense and increasingly recognized, rightly so. However, migrants' rights and the rights of the families and the communities they leave behind when they migrate, these rights are theirs independently of status, age, type of contract, or nationality. Yet too often, migrants face barriers that prevent them from enjoying the full range of their human rights, their right to not be discriminated against and to be treated equally, their right to adequate housing, to health care, their right to access legal services, to access justice if they have been victims of abuse. OHCHR wishes to highlight one right that deserves particular attention: migrants' rights to family life. In the Asia-Pacific region, millions of people migrate under temporary labor migration programs, leaving behind partners, children, and elderly parents. These programs typically do not allow migrants to be accompanied by their family members, even if they are temporary only in name and legal status. Often, people work under temporary contracts for years and are separated from their family for extended periods of time. Low wages and limited leave often make it impossible for them to make regular trips home, which are key to preserving family links. This comes at a particularly high cost for the children of migrants under such programs, who are deprived of their own right to family unity, a right protected under international law. Restrictions to migrants' rights to family life also take the form of dismissals and deportations of migrants who become pregnant while on temporary labor migration programs. The Global Compact on Migration is grounded in international human rights law and the commitment to uphold the human rights of all migrants regardless of status. To fulfill this promise is to recognize and treat all migrants as rights holders and enable them not only to make contributions to the countries to which they have migrated, but also to uphold their responsibilities to their own families and communities. Thank you.
Thank you, OHCHO, for the statement. As I see no other requests from the intergovernmental organization or United Nations entity, I will now open the floor for the intervention from the stakeholders. Oh, now we have FAO. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Migrant workers' right to equal treatment with nationals in respect of Social Security is established in various conventions of the International Labour Organization and the UN International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers and members of their families. Realizing this right in countries of destination requires equal treatment of migrant workers in Social Security laws, their enrollment into Social Security schemes, effective access to Social Security benefits, maintenance of entitlements, and payments of benefits across borders. The Asia-Pacific region has made considerable progress in extending migrant worker social protection since 2021, but several challenges remain. I would like to commend the government of Malaysia for progressive extension of migrant worker Social Security. Following the 2019 extension of the Employment Injury Scheme to migrant workers in other sectors, in June 2021, Malaysia's Social Security Organization extended the Employment Injury Scheme to also cover migrant domestic workers. In July 2024, SACSO invalidity and survivor benefit schemes were also extended to migrant workers, including migrant domestic workers. The ILO worked closely with the SACSO over the years to provide technical guidance and to carry out actuarial valuation to establish positive contribution of migrant workers in the financial health of the Social Security Fund. In Thailand, we are hopeful that ongoing discussions on possible exclusion of domestic work and agriculture sectors in the Social Security scheme will lead to a positive outcome, and migrant workers in these sectors will be protected. With regards to portability of Social Security benefits, I would like to acknowledge in particular the government of Cambodia for its leadership in the ASEAN region in realizing the ASEAN Declaration on Portability of Social Security Benefits for Migrant Workers in 2022 and the ASEAN Guidelines on Portability of Social Security Benefits for Migrant Workers in 2024. The ASEAN guidelines were developed with support from the ILO's Social Security and labor migration teams, and they provide robust technical guidance on negotiation of Social Security agreements or other cooperation mechanisms to improve cross-border Social Security coordination. The governments of Australia and Canada provided support. The next step would be fully fledged Social Security agreements ensuring equal treatment, maintenance of acquired rights, and totalization of qualifying periods, which are still lacking among ASEAN member states. In the South Asia Gulf Cooperation Corridor, Labor Migration Corridor, one of the largest in the world, the ILO, with the support of the Swiss Development Cooperation, is initiating a program to extend social protection to migrant workers. Extending migrant workers' social protection requires working in tandem to build national social protection systems, conclude bilateral social security agreements, and providing support to migrant workers in accessing social security. The ILO will continue to support the governments in the Asia-Pacific region and our social partners in moving ahead in these critical areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ILO. As I see no other request from intergovernmental organizations and UN entity, I will now open the floor for intervention from stakeholders. The first speaker on my list is the distinguished representative from the Migration, Youth and Children Platform, MYCP, and followed by the Asia Displacement Solution Platform. So please.
Thank you, Chair. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm speaking today on behalf of youth across the Asia and Pacific region. The Migration, Youth and Children Platform, a network by youth for youth, has conducted a series of consultations with young people and the organizations that work with them to gather the diverse voices that I'm amplifying here today. It is vital to ensure that we as young people are heard and included meaningfully in decision-making that will determine our futures, and that we are recognized as an independent stakeholder group in our own right within the GCM and its processes. It's on you, our partners, to work with us to implement solutions that we can create together. From these consultations, we have heard both the opportunities that migration presents for young people, as well as the negative impacts and barriers they face. We know that seeking educational opportunities is a significant driver for young people to migrate, but that international students are then faced with challenges including racism and discrimination, limited access to affordable healthcare, labor exploitation, social pressures and familial expectations, obstacles to finding meaningful work in their field of study, and difficulty navigating pathways to accessing work visas and long-term residence in the country of their study. These challenges leave young people vulnerable, and they have damaging impacts on young people's mental health, well-being, livelihoods, and their chances at building a better future. We have clear recommendations to share from these consultations. Number 1, to recognize young people as an independent stakeholder group to ensure our meaningful participation in reviews, decision-making, and policy processes on migration. Number 2, to develop and strengthen programs which link international students with potential employers and employment opportunities to facilitate easier transition to the workforce after studying, recognizing that young people are an asset and play a crucial role in filling skills shortages and addressing issues of aging workforce in many countries of destination. And number 3, to promote social support services for international students, including mental health and psychosocial support, labor rights support, legal aid, and dedicated immigration advice. These recommendations are vital steps to support young people who journey abroad in search of better educational and career opportunities and enhanced economic prospects. By addressing the challenges faced by young migrants and implementing the recommendations shared today, we can unlock opportunities for young people to thrive, contribute, and build a better future for us to inherit. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, my MYCP, for your statement. And now I invite the Asia Displacement Solution Platform for your intervention, and followed by Rafne Prawa. So please, the floor is yours.
Honorable Chair and distinguished delegates, across the world, refugees, asylum seekers, and irregular migrants hold the potential to make significant contributions to the sustainable development of their hosting countries. However, in the Asia-Pacific region, these individuals are too often relegated to the margins of society, excluded from developing planning initiatives, and prevented from reaching their full potential. Yet, in spite of their exclusion and marginalization, a recent report by the Protecting Refugees in Asia project on the current and potential economic contribution of Rohingya refugees found that Rohingya are neither a burden to public resources nor passive recipients of aid. Rather, they are developing the professional and language skills needed to pursue income-generating opportunities and contribute to local economies through informal employment. Due to their lack of legal recognition, however, they face elevated risks of workplace exploitation, non-payment of wages, and lack of protection for work undertaken in high-risk work environments. By formalizing refugees and irregular migrants' right to work and extending labor protections and fair compensation, the economic contributions of irregular migrants would be significantly enhanced. This would enable greater contributions to hosting states, which would help address key labor market shortages associated with aging workforces and revitalize economies with the diverse skills, perspectives, and innovative ideas that migrants, regardless of their migration status, bring. Therefore, to achieve GCM Objective 16, we call on states to adopt a whole-of-government and whole-of-society approach to formalize refugees' work rights and enhance labor protections to ensure fair compensation for workers in the informal economy. We call for support for increased access to certified formal education and dignified livelihood opportunities, including vocational training, microfinance initiatives, and entrepreneurship support. To ensure migrants can fully contribute to sustainable development objectives and leave no one behind, access to basic services must first be ensured. However, in the Asia-Pacific region, this is severely constrained due to delays and restrictions in the provision of and access to legal documentation. In Malaysia, for example, delays in registration have meant that asylum seekers from Myanmar are compelled to wait multiple years before their refugee status applications are processed, causing them to face significant barriers in accessing critical protection and health services. Therefore, to achieve GCM Objective 15, we call on states and international agencies to support greater cooperation and dedicated resourcing for expedited registration processes for asylum seekers to reduce backlogs and provide asylum seekers with the registration documentation and proof of legal identity necessary to safeguard their basic rights. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ADSP. And now I may invite Ravines Prawa, and followed by Solidaritas Perempuan.
Здравствуйте, уважаемые гости и коллеги. Меня зовут Назгуль. Я представляю Организацию по защите прав женщин-мигрантов «Равные права Кыргызстан». Мы приветствуем решение стран Центральной Азии присоединиться к глобальному договору о миграции и усилия, предпринимаемые для реализации достижений всех 23 целей GCM на национальном уровне. Сегодня я хочу выделить две неотложные области, которые требуют наших коллективных действий. Во-первых, необходимость большего признания и приоритетности женщин внутренних и вернувшихся мигрантов GSM. И во-вторых, необходимость укрепления сотрудничества между гражданским обществом и правительствами для обеспечения эффективной реализации GSM. Организации гражданского общества, которые тесно сотрудничают с женщинами-мигрантами, на низовом уровне хорошо подготовлены для сбора данных на основе фактических данных, которые могут быть использованы при разработке политики. Чтобы GSM был действительно эффективным, мы должны институционализировать сотрудничество между гражданским обществом и правительствами, гарантируя, что голоса и жизненный опыт женщин-мигрантов будут формировать национальные иммиграционные стратегии. Кроме того, мы призываем международное сообщество усилить внимание к внутренним и вернувшимся мигрантам, женщинам в системах труда и социальной защиты, признавая их вклад и устраняя их уязвимость. Спасибо.
I thank you so much, Ravine Prawa, and may I invite the Solidaritas Perempuan, and followed by Beranda Migrant.
Excellencies, delegates, and colleagues, I am Amnesty Amalia Utami, representing Solidaritas Perempuan Sebelah Lampung, member of EPWLD. Patriarchal structure coupled with globalization reinforce gender stereotype of women migrant workers. The changing land use pattern and shift in the country production patterns mean that previously self-reliant women are now structurally marginalized and forced to seek alternative source of livelihood. This has been one of the driving factors for unskilled women migrant workers to seek employment opportunity abroad in informal sector jobs and makes them highly vulnerable to trafficking and irregular migration. This vulnerability is exacerbated by their inability to obtain reliable information on safe migration. During the departure process, brokers are commonly used to seek employment abroad. This practice increases the higher risks of migrating unlawfully or being trafficked. In the destination country, women migrants experience significant violation, abuse by their employers since they don't have work contracts. The burden of return on the migrant woman and not employer or state, most of the migrant women report that to the return. They face a salary reduction equivalent to 3 months of work. Reintegration program doesn't optimally touch former women migrant workers, and the burden of finding re-employment is on the individual, especially for those migrants who are in irregular situation. Based on this, the following are our demands and recommendation is: first, the government must provide one-stop integrated service for migrant workers that are gender responsive, accessible, and comprehensive for the protection of all migrant workers regardless of their status. Second, systematically build mechanism to protect the women migrant workers at the local or village level through accurate and comprehensive information. Third, build mechanism for communication, coordination, and involvement of civil society and other civil society organizations who working for the rights of the migrant workers, as well as involving them in discussing the situation as well as policies and programs needed for migrant workers. Fourth, cross-border protection, mechanism for prevention, treatment, and repatriation and recovery of victims, which also includes coverage for repatriation costs which are often charged by the state to migrants in irregular situation. 5. Establish a reintegration program and service women migrant workers for retired migrant workers returning to Indonesia. And thank you.
I thank you, Solidaritas Perempuan. And next, may I invite Barenda Migrant, and followed by the National Network for Safe Migration and NSM.
Thank you, Chair. I am Hanida Christie and I represent Barenda Migrant Indonesia. We advocate for comprehensive and inclusive protection for all Indonesian migrant workers, regardless of the status. I speak here and stand with the mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, and families of Indonesian migrant workers who are struggling to seek protection, rescue, and repatriation their family who have been recruited and trapped in transnational criminal syndicates, especially in many countries in Southeast Asia. We would like to raise the alarm over the increasing number of young generations, the labor forces, who are recruited and trapped in these criminal industries. This exposes the reality that the current situation of the young generations, especially in the country where I came from, Indonesia, who face poverty, unemployment, economic crisis, and vulnerability. Working abroad is considered the only situation to sustaining their lives, but desperation to find a decent income makes them prone to any recruitment systems by the syndicates. Many of them are treated like slaves, working under pressure of armed force, being held captive, and working long hours. Even when they manage to escape, they do not necessarily get proper protection and return assistance from the government. The weakness of the national economy, victim assistance, prevention, and protection of citizens from various illegal recruitment schemes make Indonesian citizens as an easy target of labor supply for the sustainability threats and target of cyber scams for the profit of the criminal industry. In this urgent situation, that threatens the young generations and people, we would like to call for governments to ensure a victim-centered approach in handling the concern of labor trafficking and cyber scams. The second one, for the governments to immediate rescue and provide return assistance for migrant workers who are recruited and trapped in trafficking syndicates and transnational criminal industries. The third one, for the governments to provide a hotline or rapid response platform to report from migrant workers and their families who experience violence and exploitation and need rescue. And the last one, eradicating poverty by encouraging the sustainable improvement of home economy, which can generate decent domestic works and livelihoods. Thank you.
I thank you so much, Veranda Migrant. Last but not least, may I invite the National Network for Safe Migration to have a floor.
Respected Chair, it's my pleasure to inform you that Nepal has fully adopted the whole of society approach in bringing out the National GCM implementation framework. We have found that our voices have been heard well in the document. We thank IOM for making this happen. However, we have experienced some challenges in achieving the goal of safe, orderly, and regular migration. To reach closer to our objectives, we have the following recommendations to all concerned. 1. We have experienced that the readiness of labor destination countries for the employer pay principle is far less than they should have been, resulting in the challenges in our advocating efforts. We urge labor destination countries to be committed to the employer pay principle. We have experienced the gaps in the implementation of bilateral agreements done with labor destination countries. We as civil society organizations want to be included as part of BLA implementation oversight mechanisms. Number 3, many people have, as our preliminary study suggests, chosen migration as one of the livelihood options, particularly when they are affected or feel that they are likely to be affected by climate impacts. Some are unable to migrate though they wish due to various constraints, including lack of resources. However, our advocacy efforts are mired by the inadequacy of country-specific evidence, and both climate migrants and immobile populations are deprived of the support services. We request all to work on country-specific evidence generation and support services for the climate migrants and climate immobile population. We urge countries to ratify ILOC 189, which helps us in the negotiation on BLAs for migration care workers. In order to ensure uniformity, we urge the region to develop and put in force a standard employment contract in the region. 5, we urge employers to ensure a 24-hour insurance provision because many migrant workers are deprived of this facility as employers provide the workers with the insurance that covers the working hours only. 6th, we urge labor destination countries to include migrant workers in their social security schemes and ensure the portability of social security. Thank you, Chair.
I thank you so much, the National Network for Safe Migration. As I see no more speakers, I would like to thank the moderator, panelists, and delegates for their active participation. The meeting has now concluded. Its deliberation under Agenda Item 3C, supporting migrant protection, integration, and contribution to development, addressing the objective 14 to 16, 19, 20, and 22. So now we will take up Agenda Item 3D, improving value-driven and evidence-based policy making and public debate and enhancing cooperation on migration. The fourth roundtable discussing will be moderated by Mr. Srivana Thata, Director Social Development Division, ESCAP. May I please ask the moderator and the panelists of the 4 roundtable discussion to take their seats in the sofa chair. Mr. Tata, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Distinguished delegates and panelists, I have the honor to welcome all of you to Roundtable 4 on strengthening evidence-based policymaking, public debate and cooperation for safe, orderly and regular migration. This roundtable is of course organized within by ESCAP, but within the framework of course of the UN network, working together with everyone, and focuses on GCM objectives 1, 3, 7, 17 and 23. We have come, it's the last roundtable, but I believe that we have a very, very exciting panel discussion here. But given that we have a few other couple of agenda items to follow, we hope to be succinct during this panel discussion. But it doesn't mean that the discussion will be any less interesting. This roundtable actually addresses the way in which we generate the right evidence and adequate evidence to inform policy making, but also evidence to address the discourses that are going around on migration. And also to see that at least, and last but not least, to focus on how regional cooperation can help us achieve all these objectives. In our roundtable, we have 3 really expert speakers who will help us address these objectives. To my right, I have Ms. Lisa Basales, who is the Executive Director of the Commission on Population and Development from Philippines. To my left, Mr. Elroy Yee, producer, Untitled Company, Malaysia. Very interesting name for his filmmaking company. And last but not least, in the corner, Mr. William Goyce, who is the Regional Coordinator of Migrant Forum Asia. For many of you, he needs no introduction. Someone who's been advocating for rights of migrants for a very long time indeed. I will ask 2 rounds of questions. And the first round of questions will be slightly, you'll have about 3 to 4 minutes to answer. And I will ask a specific set of questions and we'll come back with a set of a summing up question with a shorter time frame. I'll start with you, Ms. Dr. Basales. Thank you so much for being with us today. Given your long experience of working on social development and demographic issues, including migration and data and statistics, what do you think are the key challenges and lessons learned in collecting and utilizing accurate and disaggregated data? And we heard about it in the last panel discussion also, relevant to migrants and migration. How can these challenges be addressed? And are there any good practices that you can refer to, both from Philippines, but I know that you have knowledge of other countries. Over to you, Dr. Basales.
Thank you, Mr. Tata. You know, I was part of the discussion of the statistic community in 2014 when we're starting discussing the 2030 agenda and the SDGs. And the SDGs actually gave impetus for data producers in countries to really look into the provision of disaggregated data. Among them, disaggregation by migratory status. So one lesson learned I had was the importance of coming together and really discussing at the international level, sharing country experiences on data issues. The other lesson I learned is that leaving no one behind included leaving no other data producers behind. In discussions of data, national statistical systems, and specifically national statistics offices, are the main producers of data. And they use traditional data collection like censuses of population and housing, surveys. The SDGs put into the consciousness of statistical systems that there are other data out there. The low-hanging fruit we were discussing then were administrative data. These are the data from other government agencies, from registers and administrative records. But the SDGs also put in the picture the private sector data, data from CSOs, big data. And so one lesson learned is with the demand for more disaggregated data, national statistical systems, official statistics should also look into other available data sources. Now, listening to the discussions in the past day and today, I really am amazed at how much data are being produced now and used by statistical systems, compiled by international organizations and posted in their various platforms, and but also how even the migrants themselves are producing data. And so now, lesson learned for me, and I know for all of us here, is that we really have to come together and have the traditional data sources, which are really more big picture, but also drill down to other data sources for very specific issues, like missing migrants. No, the statistics surveys will not capture those. Now, the challenges are, because there's a lot of information out there, how do we access them in such a way that they're comparable? So standard definitions of migration really have to be still developed. Good practices, expert groups coming together and discussing issues and addressing standards. For me, data standards are very important. Yes. And also, other good practices are the platforms I mentioned. Now we are very digital, so we can just go and look at open data sources and other platforms on migration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Basales, for laying your finger on the fact that we need to really go beyond the normal traditional sources. And who better than you dealing with this whole demographic issue where you know that we need to go into big data that's available and how we can use technology innovatively. But I'll come back to you maybe in your wrap up. Elroy, given your experience as a multimedia journalist and filmmaker with a focus on social issues, including migration, how have states, grassroots organizations, or migrants themselves created fact-based narratives about migrants and their contributions? And tell me, have they been successful in addressing some of the negative perceptions? And how can we do this better? And what are the effective and actual challenges of distribution?
Good evening, everyone. I'm a journalist, like you mentioned. I'm not used to these spaces, so if you'll allow me to do it a bit differently, I'll start with a story. Yes. Yeah. Yesterday morning, as I was walking through those doors, a lady started speaking to me. She looked to me like a perfectly white Caucasian woman, but she spoke to me in Hakka, in Chinese Hakka, and I am Hakka. Ngaya Hakangin, if you know Hakka. And to be able to speak that language in this space, it felt like I put a bit of my history into this place. And Hakka, the language, is seen as an endangered language by a lot of people, something people are trying to preserve. So it was completely like it was a moment for me, a moment of genuine connection. So jumping off from that, the term Hakka actually means guest people, people who don't really belong. Yeah. Now, of course, the term Hakka is given by outsiders. You know, outside people call you Hakka because no one goes around calling themselves guest people. So obviously, the people who thought themselves more local were calling my ancestors guest people, Hakka. The term stuck, the name stuck. Now we take on that identity. But at the time, it came with attributes as being more rural, maybe a bit more hardy or pragmatic, less refined, compared to the more cultured townspeople who were, I believe, Cantonese. In a roundabout way, my point is that identities can crystallize in conflict, in opposition. When one culture meets another culture in opposition, that identity can start to form, become solid, become real. So cultures can start finding their identities as opposites of each other. Yeah. So one of the key concerns that's been raised during stakeholder consultations over the past months, and thanks to Fish and everyone who ran these consultations, one of the main concerns that came up was the securitized narrative state governments consistently tell about migration, portraying migrants as a national security threat on one side and citizens as potential victims on the opposite side. Sure, it helps crystallize national identity. It scores you a few good political points, but at what cost? The Hakka and Cantonese ended up fighting a devastating clan war that left 1 million dead. They call it the Hakka-Punti Wars. The Punti-Hakka Wars, literally meaning the local versus Hakka wars. Yeah, left 1 million dead. So to the government representatives gathered here today, you know that most of your economies cannot survive without migration. As the migrants live and work in your countries, it is to your benefit to create conditions where they can do so in peace and dignity. And there are many more challenges in addressing these perceptions, and all of them are listed in the migration report, in the consultation reports, all online. Feel free to browse. I won't list them here. I'm in no position, actually. But now to what has worked well. Yeah? In stakeholder consultations, consistently highlighted was the importance of centering migrant voices. The lived experiences of migrants in all its nuances, in all its idiosyncrasies, needs to be at the forefront of all advocacy efforts, of all public narratives about migration. Yeah. But we cannot stop there. That is actually not enough. As we build platforms from which migrants can speak boldly, we need to also set the tables where migrants and locals can come together, converse in empathy, find common ground, celebrate differences, and imagine a future together. Because remember, identities crystallize in conflict. We need these tables where everybody has a stake. Spaces where migrants, local communities, and other identities can come together just to be together. I will end soon, I promise. All of us have our work cut out. Because in truth, it is unlikely that we can ever build a world without discrimination whatsoever. Zero discrimination. We will all have differences that challenge each other. So for those of you committed to the work of social cohesion, I'll leave you with a quote. I recently watched a documentary, so I'm very cultured today. A quote from a journalist of some repute who stood against nationalism. Some battles are not fought for victory. They are fought so the world knows someone was on the battleground. Let me say that I dislike conflict language, battle, war, fight, win. It's not really, I don't really feel comfortable with it, but the quote is so apt I couldn't resist. But what I'm saying is we need to hold space. In the battleground, I imagine us laying out tables, welcoming people, and just making peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that was a very thought-provoking and extremely emotive representation of what you wanted to say. Thank you very much. Mr. Goyes, as Regional Coordinator of Migrant Forum Asia, you have much experience in the area of partnerships and cooperation. What progress, what has been the progress in recent years in bilateral, sub-regional, and regional cooperation? I mean, I know that you will pick out the really key ones that you think that we should focus on, and what remains to be done.
Look, I think as far as at the bilateral level, the kind of, we know, for example, at least we are constantly looking at the Philippine bilateral agreement with Germany, which has been in some ways a trendsetter in the sense of the stakeholders that were involved in the designing of it. There are still questions in it, but there is some progress made. And I think it is important to look at it because when things happen in migration governance, some things become a mantra very fast. And so there is a mantra around bilateral agreements. But the question is, and in our stakeholder engagement, one of the big challenges that came out is how many of these bilateral agreements have trade unions, CSOs, and other stakeholders involved in the designing and the monitoring of the bilateral agreement. I think that is going to be key. And again, I think in the German-Philippine ones, there is that kind of regular updating, monitoring, and stakeholdership. So that would be something to look at, kind of thing. There are others. In our region, we do have regional processes to look at. There's the Colombo process, there's the Abu Dhabi dialogue, there's ASEAN. And the question about the success of this, I think, largely depends on the way it is kind of constructed and way it is followed through, and most importantly, the way stakeholders are brought in. I think the world has shifted. I think there is more openness in an all of society approach, something what is happening here to be replicated at national and sub-regional level. I don't think we are making enough progress along those lines. And that is why we might want to see that. So for example, one of the good bilateral kind of stakeholder bilateral workings that we have had is on our campaign on data on access to justice on wage theft. Now we know we've got support from Philippines, from Nepal, from Bangladesh. We've got support from governments in giving us cases and data of workers who have come away without wages and things like that. And I think we need to work together, like Ma'am said, on this granular kind of data, which many of us are collecting. How do we collect it together and move away from that kind of one source of data gathering? But those are kind of some examples where we can actually move forward. It's happening, but we need to move much, much more faster in this kind of political time that we are in to shift the narrative.
Thank you very much, William. You you're very focused in your response, picked out a very important example, and the importance of involving the stakeholders concerned and getting their views and getting them on the table as actual participants and contributors. So thank you for highlighting a good example and highlighting a priority. Madam Basales, I would like to come back to you for you to reflect, having heard the theme of, if you wanted to choose one regional priority that you think you want the member states here to focus on, what would that be? Whether it be in the area of data or whether it be in the area of regional cooperation, I want you to identify one regional priority and explain why, maybe in 2 to 3 minutes.
My personal choice, really, moving forward for Asian Pacific as regards the issue of migration, is looking at subnational. Because we've been talking about families left behind. In the Philippines, for example, we are a sending out country. So the issue we have is not about migrants coming to the Philippines and how we could take care of them, but there are some of them, of course. Ours is more what happens to especially our labor migrants and the children left behind. In my office, we're monitoring adolescent pregnancy, and adolescent pregnancy for girls from 15 to 19 has been decreasing, but 14 and below girls getting pregnant has an increasing trend. And there are reports that many of these girls are from OFW families. So families left behind is something that I would like to request for Asia Pacific to look into.
Thank you very much. I think it's a very specific aspect to identify why you think they need the attention. And I think it cuts across many sending countries in our region. I think we'll have an opportunity to come back in case we have any questions coming back. Anything else?
Mr. Tata, can I add more?
Yes, please.
So I've been looking at the 2024 migration report of the UN ESCAP. Congratulations. I always follow UN ESCAP reports. And there are a lot of issues there, of course, including data. But I also listened to the suggested indicators, GCM indicators of the migration network, where there are 23 core indicators, 76. And I find that the GCM was approved in 2018, and it's only now that we're discussing indicators to monitor GCM. So my other suggestion for Asia Pacific and maybe globally is to go through those indicators again and follow the process used by the expert group on SDGs, where we looked at data sources, who are the custodians. And for me, the stakeholders here that have been producing data should be considered, especially for very granular information of very specific population groups. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Your points are, I'm sure, being taken note of by members of the regional network, but more importantly, the Global Network Secretariat, which is also present here. Thank you so much, Mr. Salas. Coming to you, Elroy, one priority from you and why?
I think nation states perhaps can highlight more of your migration history in your nation building process. I think that helps disarm a lot of nationalistic tendencies. That's one. But I think for the media, I think I need to say something since I'm a journalist. We use conflict language a lot in the press. It's time we phase that out. I think it goes back to a lot of the news values frameworks that journalists operate on. They have various 5, 7, 9 news values. But maybe we need to start talking to newsrooms about having social cohesion values as a news value. I think it's already there. So when you have stories where people come together, it's they call it maybe a human interest story sometimes and gets filed in like some weird section somewhere. But those stories do get traction, and we can tell newsrooms that please do more of these stories and put it in your values framework, in your ethical framework, social cohesion.
Thank you very much. I think you've identified for the media as well as for the nation states. Over to you, William.
I think the one resounding priority that has surfaced over the last 3 days from the stakeholder discussions till now is the question of the right to organize. That has come out as a resounding priority for this region. And there is a reason for that also. The reason for that is probably this is the only region that has such a strong collaboration between trade unions and civil society organizations working on changing the power differential for migrants, in which migrants start getting power. And I think that is an important priority. I will say, however, a priority to the region that has not surfaced is that of climate. And I think our Pacific friends have carried this issue. We need definitely to recognize that this is a priority of not just the Pacific, but very much a priority of Asia as well. So I would leave it at those two kind of priorities as surfaced. One very visibly, one is there, but we have not articulated well enough over the last 3 days.
I think you're kind of really, there's the answer in terms of resonance. I think of course the right to organize, but I think you had a number of side events, including one this afternoon that addressed the issue of climate mobility and the rights of migrants who have to move because of climate change related reasons. We have a little time for taking any questions specifically to the panel, not please statements. I'm sure you will deliver statements when the time comes. If we've got 3 extremely erudite panelists, if there's specific questions on the priorities that they identified and the issues that they highlighted. Yes, delegate from the Philippines.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Very insightful discussions. And just listening to the earlier panel and this panel, one can't help but tie up all the key points that was raised. As the moderator has earlier mentioned, in the panel prior to this, is that they've mentioned contributions of the migrants, inclusivity, and the one migration data. And this is reaffirmed by the head of the Philippine Commission on Population Development about coming together because of the shift in the narrative, as also pointed out. Because what has yet to be looked into is the role of our migrants in terms of economies, as Mr. Yi has said also, that economies will not survive without the migrants. So as we are talking about improving value-driven and evidence-based policy making, this is something that deserves to be looked at. Because in the first day of our review here, one of the speakers did already point out that migrants support the economies of recipient countries by providing skilled labor. So this is something that has to be looked at because it will further give reason to the importance of the role of the migrants. Thank you very much.
Absolutely right. And I think the many sectors in many of the receiving countries which are held up by migrants. And I think Elroy did refer to that maybe these need to be strengthened, highlighted, and these positive stories held out. Yes, the lady at the back, please. Short question, please. Your microphone there? I can't, sorry, ma'am. There's a microphone in front of you? Did you raise your hand?
Is it me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, okay, thank you. Sumita from Our Journey, based in Malaysia.
Yes.
I agree with Elroy that media must have some values when they are reporting on migrant issues. But Elroy, I want to ask you something. What values did you stand by when you went into a plantation, did a video on the migrants, undocumented migrants in that estate, and exposed them to raids? That estate was raided after your program. I want to know what values you stood by when you went there to do that program. And you did not extend any assistance after that. No, I'm sorry, but he needs to know what he has done.
Yeah, he'll answer the question.
Yeah?
He'll answer the question, and I mean, we wanted a more constructive question, but that's fine. He'll answer the question, please. Please, let's not make it a combative. I think it's a comment that it's not something. Please go ahead.
Am I audible?
Yes. Just be sure.
Sumita, thank you for raising that at this point. I believe we did that program, and the raids happened a year after we did the program, and it happened because a newspaper, I'll name them here, Utusan Malaysia, went in, did some videos, posted it on TikTok. It went viral, and the raids happened after the TikTok video was published. That is the actual truth. So we have the video, and then after that we offered them assistance. We went in and we helped register the undocumented children together with Liberate and Alex.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think, look, you can take this discussion offline, and I'm sure you can have a discussion separately. I'm sorry to put an end to that. Any last words from? No, we are slightly out of time because we need to take some comments from the. So if you don't mind, we'll have to hand back to the chair. But I would like to offer a quick wrap up for both William as well as Lisa. Just very, very short, please.
Well, the quick wrap up is for the documenters who have been documenting the last 3 days.
Yes.
I think it will be really important to highlight somewhere what are our regional priorities. And as we move to the IMRF, these regional priorities need to surface. Otherwise, they get lost in an international discussion. The regional specificity needs to come out. Thank you.
Lisa.
I'm back to what I said earlier, that we now have a lot of data on migration, but they are in different platforms. I've looked at the Migration Network platform, and there are a lot of the resources there. So I'm thinking there should be some discussion on where we can point those who need data to where these different platforms are. Thank you very much.
We'll definitely have a look at that. Thank you so much. May I ask for a hand of applause for our panelists? I'd like to hand back. I'm sorry we couldn't really explore the full depth of their knowledge given the time, but then I'd like to hand back to the chair, given that there are a couple more agenda items to cover. Thank you very much. It's been a great honor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Tata, and distinguished panelists. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I will now open the floor for statement. I would like to urge all speakers to strictly adhere to the time limit of 3 minutes again, to ensure we can hear from all those participants. The Secretariat has received speaking requests, and we will also call on for government in the room who raise their flag. I will first open the floor for statement from members, associate members, and observer country. I will then invite statement from the intergovernmental organization, United Nations entity, and representative of stakeholder group. Since we have received many speaking requests already, and time permitting, I will only call all stakeholders, organizations, and have not yet spoken. I open the floor for statement. I now have the list already, so invite the distinguished delegate of Republic of Korea to please take the floor, followed by Philippines, by China. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Among all the important objectives discussed in this session, I would like to briefly share what the Korean government has been working on to implement Objective 3, accurate and timely information, and 23, regional and international cooperation. Regarding the Objective 3, Korea fully recognizes that in order to achieve safe, orderly, and regular migration, migrants should be more empowered and better informed. With close cooperation with local governments and communities, the government of Korea operates mechanisms such as Foreign Resident Support Council to ensure that their voices are reflected in the policymaking process. Furthermore, to improve access to information at each stage of migration, the government plans to set up an online platform covering visa applications, immigration, and other relevant social services, and of course, with different languages. Regarding Objective 23, we recognize the importance of strengthened coordination and collaboration within the Asian-Pacific region, given that the region accounts for nearly 40% of the world's migrants. With this in mind, apart from this regional review meeting, we continue to engage with the regional forums and channels. In April last year, the Korean government participated in the third ASEAN Plus 3 Senior Immigration Official Meeting in Vietnam and the fourth Tokyo Immigration Forum in December to exchange practices and information among relevant ministries within the region. I would like to end by appreciating again for UN ESCAP and UN Network on Migration's efforts to convene this meeting, and also by reaffirming Korea's commitments to implement GCM for safe, orderly, and regular migration. Thank you.
Thank you, Republic of Korea. And now I invite the representative of China and followed by Philippines.
感谢主席，各位尊敬的代表。关于这个议题呢，我想分享以下3个观点。第一，就是中国始终以开放的态度看待移民，反对污名化，打击歧视和仇恨言论。中国坚持走中国人权发展道路，坚持全面促进和保护各类人权。 加强国际对话合作和协调配合，对歧视和仇恨移民零容忍，注意保护移民正当权益，确保正常移民畅通，为移民创造公平良好的生存环境，让移民成为可持续发展的贡献者、受益者。第二，中国加强打击跨境犯罪执法合作。 中国不断加强预防、调查、起诉和惩处偷渡犯罪的能力，深入开展国际合作，利用跨国、区域和双边机制分享有关偷渡路线、团伙、作案手法等相关信息，促进跨境执法合作和情报合作，以预防和打击偷渡活动。2020年以来，中国以观察员的身份。 参与联合国打击跨国有组织犯罪公约偷运渔民工作组会议相关活动，积极跟进了解全球偷运移民犯罪活动的趋势和特点，及时采取针对性的防范和打击措施。我们还持续密切与国际刑警组织等国际组织以及有关国家的移民执法部门的沟通联系。 加强在互通情报信息、协助调查取证、联合办理案件等方面的执法合作，切实维护安全、有序、正常的出入境秩序。第三是加强国际合作和全球伙伴关系。中国政府全面规划、扎实推进移民领域国际合作，积极推进多边、双边框架的移民领域对话、交流、合作，不断凝聚移民治理的理念共识。中国全面参与国际刑警组织、巴黎进程、上海合作组织成员国主管机关边防部门领导人会议、全球移民与发展论坛、国际边防警察大会等多边框架下的移民领域事务，提出移民管理、执法合作、促进人员往来的务实合作建议，宣介共同治理、共同发展的中国主张和中国倡议。我的发言完毕，谢谢。
Thank you, distinguished delegate from China. And now is the delegates from Philippines and followed by Japan.
Esteemed colleagues, good afternoon. Our gathering underscores the urgency of improving value-driven and evidence-based policy making and public debate on migration governance, strengthening cooperation, and ensuring that our interventions remain responsive to the evolving realities of global mobility. Migration, when managed effectively, serves as a catalyst for economic growth, cultural exchange, and social development. However, its governance must be anchored on principles that uphold human dignity, protect the rights of migrant workers, and foster international cooperation. To this end, the Philippines has undertaken significant measures in alignment to the 23 objectives of the GCM, particularly objectives 1, 3, 7, 17, and 23. At the heart of our efforts lie a steadfast commitment to empirical decision-making. The Department of Migrant Workers has institutionalized a robust research and data-driven framework spearheaded by the Institute of Advanced Strategic Studies on Migration and Development. The establishment of this institute ensures that migration policies are informed by accurate, timely, and comprehensive data, reinforcing our national migration governance with rigorous statistical insights and international best practices. Yet, the pursuit of evidence-based policymaking demands more than just data. It requires meaningful engagement with all relevant stakeholders. In recognition of this necessity, the DMW also established the Foreign Stakeholders Relations and Engagement Branch to facilitate systematic consultations with civil society, international organizations, migrant communities, and employer representatives. This institutional mechanism embodies GCM's whole-of-government, whole-of-society approach, ensuring that migration are inclusive, transparent, and responsive to the needs of all sectors involved. Recognizing the importance of skills development and mobility, the Philippines has strengthened partnerships with the Technical Education and Skills Development Authority. These initiatives ensure that Filipino workers are equipped with globally competitive skills, promoting their professional advancement and reducing vulnerabilities associated with low skills employment. On public debate and international cooperation, the Philippines actively promotes transparent information sharing mechanisms such as pre-employment orientation seminar, pre-departure orientation seminars, which empower migrant workers with knowledge of their rights, responsibilities. Moreover, digital innovations such as DMW e-registry system, mobile app, have streamlined access to vital information, ensuring that workers are adequately informed. Equally vital is our unwavering commitment to international cooperation with our bilateral labor agreements. In conclusion, distinguished colleagues, the path to effective migration governance is paved with rigorous research, multi-stakeholder collaboration, and principled international cooperation. Thank you very much.
I thank you so much, the distinguished delegate from Philippines. And now may I invite the distinguished delegates from Japan and followed by Vietnam.
Thank you, Chair. Migration is closely linked with development.
In relation to the employment, the Japanese government provides employment support for migrants to promote stable employment and workplace settlement by providing career counseling, by assigning specialized counselors, and job information that is easy for settled foreign residents to apply for. And we also implement a foreign employment and settlement support project with the aim of improving communication skills in Japanese workplaces and acquiring knowledge about business customs, and are publicizing and utilizing tools created in the project to facilitate communication with foreign workers at companies. In addition, we are providing vocational training for foreign residents. It was some 20 years ago that we came to know that the total amount of remittances migrants sent to their family exceeded the total amount of official development aid. The remittance is the fruit of the hard work of migrants, and also it will benefit the home country's economy. It is important that the remittance would be made with a moderate cost, which is also one of the SDG targets. Japan is improving the convenience of financial services for foreign residents in opening bank accounts and sending money overseas. Through the amendments of Payment Services Act, the mode of international money transfer was diversified, which is improving the convenience and protection of users, including migrant workers. Thank you.
I thank you so much for the delegates from Japan. And now may I invite the distinguished delegate from Vietnam and followed by Bangladesh.
Madam Chair, distinguished delegates, migration statistics are important to evaluate migration patterns and characteristics, track the progress in achieving migration-related policy and program, including the GCM, and promote the accurate narrative of migration. However, collecting data is not an easy task, as migration is multidimensional and multi-sectoral, involving various government agencies. Vietnam is currently in the process of setting up a national data center governed by the government to integrate all types of data and coordinate data collection by different ministries. Over the past 3 years, Vietnam has made great efforts in collecting international migration from the central to local level based on migration statistical forms provided by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in accordance with regulation of specific sectoral statistics. In October 2024, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs released the Vietnam Migration Profile 2023 based on the results of data collection and statistics on migration. This document evaluates the migration pattern of Vietnam citizens abroad and foreigners in Vietnam, as well as migration-related policy and laws from 2017 to 2023, and offer recommendations for improving migration governance in the coming period. In terms of labor migration, Vietnam published 2 studies in December 2022 with support from the International Labour Organization, namely Measuring Sustainable Development Goal Indicator 1071 on recruitment costs of Vietnamese workers overseas and data gaps in international labor migration statistics in Vietnam. This report was based on survey results aimed at identifying issues related to recruitment costs, promoting fair and effective recruitment policy for all migrant workers, ensuring that labor migration is well managed and protects the rights and interests of workers in a timely manner. We look forward to more support from UN Migration Network in strengthening capacity in migration data collection and peer-to-peer successful experiences in this area to effectively implement the GCM. I thank you.
Thank you so much, distinguished guests from Vietnam. And may I invite the distinguished delegates from Bangladesh and followed by Pakistan.
Madam Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen.
It's an honor to address this esteemed gathering on the importance of value-driven and evidence-based migration policy making. As a country deeply engaged in migration governance, Bangladesh firmly believes that migration policies must be guided by reliable data, human rights principles, and strong international cooperation. Under Objective 1, Bangladesh has significantly improved its data collection mechanism, facilitating evidence-based decision-making on labor migration, return migration, and migrant protections. Objective 3 underscores the need for a right-based approach to migration. Bangladesh is updating its national migration policy and developing a diaspora policy to reflect the evolving challenges of migration governance. This policy emphasizes gender equality, ethical recruitment, and socio-economic empowerment of migrant workers. On Objective 7, Bangladesh continued to build capacity building for migrants through skill development program that align with international labor market demands. Partnerships with destination countries ensure the mutual recognition of skills, enhancing job security and career progression for Bangladeshi workers. Bangladesh also prioritizes Objective 17, that is promoting balanced narratives on migration. Public awareness campaign, engagement with media and mass media, and migration consultation platforms have helped counter misinformation and highlights migrants' contributions to development. An informed society is essential for fostering inclusive migration policies. Lastly, on Objective 23, Bangladesh remains steadfast in enhancing international cooperation on migration governance. As an active participant in global and regional dialogues, we advocate for stronger partnership in protecting migrants' rights, facilitating legal pathways, and combating irregular migration. Strengthening bilateral agreements and engaging with regional mechanisms such as the Abu Dhabi dialogue and the Colombo process remain integral to our approach. Madam Chair, as we navigate the complexities of migration governance, let us reaffirm our commitment to collaboration, transparency, and migrant-centered policies. Bangladesh looks forward to continued partnership to achieve safe, orderly, and regular migration for all. To conclude, Bangladesh's government views migration as a catalyst for shared prosperity. By grounding policies in evidence, values, and cooperation, Bangladesh aims to set a regional benchmark for migration governance. We urge collective action to ensure no migrant is left behind. I thank you all.
Thank you so much, delegates from Bangladesh. And may I invite the distinguished delegate from Pakistan and look forward for the other government who want to have the statement. Please, Pakistan.
Thank you, Chair. In the context of Objective 6, Pakistan signed the 4th Decent Work Country Program with employers and workers organizations and International Labour Organization, showing its commitment to ensure decent work in the country. And Pakistan has successfully convened a national tripartite labour conference after a lapse of 15 years, which concluded with a pledge to improve the governance structure geared towards improving OSH, strengthening social dialogue, and ensuring a unified approach to labour reform across the country. In November last year, Pakistan approved the ratification of 2 additional ILO conventions and 1 protocol. Pakistan plans to ratify 3 more ILO conventions in 2025, focusing on occupational safety and health. Besides, Pakistan launched its National Occupational and Safety Health Profile in November, which is a comprehensive framework to address workplace safety and health challenges in line with international standards. Moreover, we had developed online web portals for the advertisement of available jobs to ensure transparency. Likewise, Pakistan have introduced digitized registration at Protectorate of Immigrant Office to minimize human interference. Thank you.
I thank you so much, Pakistan. And now my last speakers is Philippines, may be limited for 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to take the floor. Efforts to improve data information collection are vital. Data should encompass all relevant aspects of migration situations to evaluate the overall migration development nexus. In the Philippines, we are looking at the next 15 years, anchored on Ambition, or our Vision 2040, a picture of our collective future. Strategies for ensuring safe, orderly, and regular migration, and developing a comprehensive pathway for returning overseas Filipinos are integrated into our national development plans as core components. As raised yesterday and just today, migrants support the economies of recipient countries by providing skilled labor. Our economies cannot survive without migrants. It is one case in point wherein empirical evidence-based data would be invaluable in demonstrating how migrants are net contributors in real terms to the GDP increase of many countries that host migrants. Nearly a decade ago, an IMF report examined migration's long-term effects on advanced economies' GDP per capita. It found that immigration boosts the GDP per capita of host economies primarily by improving labor productivity. In the Philippines, our laws mandate a shared government information system for migration to facilitate the free flow of data exchanges and sharing among the relevant national agencies. To consider the situation and potential solutions, a diagnostic of migration trends and detailed analysis of challenges and opportunities can aid in developing strategies to leverage the advantages of migration and promote the achievement of migration-related SDGs. Thank you.
I thank you so much, Philippines, and I apologize for the next speakers due to the time limited. So maybe you have only 2 minutes speak. And may I now open the floor for the intervention of the intergovernmental organization and United Nations entity. The first speakers on my list is ADB and followed by ILO.
Thank you, Chair. I represent Asian Development Bank. To start with, I'd like to echo all the previous speakers in highlighting the importance of regional and global cooperation on migration. Supporting regional cooperation is part of ADB's charter mandate. The recent midterm review of ADB's Strategy 2030 identified regional cooperation as one of the 5 strategic focus areas for accelerated work. ADB's regional cooperation strategy is built on 3 pillars, including building high-quality physical and economic connectivity among our member countries, expanding regional and global trade and investment, and promoting regional public goods. Migration is a cross-cutting issue and relevant to all the 3 pillars. ADB supports the implementation of the GCM through our sub-regional cooperation programs in the Greater Mekong sub-region, Central Asia sub-region, and the South Asia sub-region. Our migration-related operations include the following. First, supporting cross-country policy dialogues under our sub-regional programs to increase and improve labor mobility across borders. For example, we are promoting mutual recognition of skills and qualifications through our technical assistance in Central Asia. Second, building skills and the capacity of migrant workers through investment in technical and vocational education and training, or TVET. For example, the TVET schools and colleges funded by ADB's education projects in China's Guangxi Autonomous Region, which borders Vietnam, are training not only China's own workers, but also migrant workers from neighboring countries, including Vietnam. Those schools and colleges also have exchange programs with their counterparts in Southeast Asian countries. Third, improving health services for migrant workers. For example, ADB's Border Area Health Project in Cambodia is helping establish a health surveillance system at the border crossing points along the Cambodia-Thailand border and provide a low-cost social health insurance for Cambodian migrant workers in Thailand. Fourth, we're also helping our developing member countries address some of the impacts of migration. For example, we are supporting a study under the Pacific Islands Forum framework on the implications of the outflow of skilled labor on small island developing states. To conclude, I'd like to reaffirm ADB's continued commitment to supporting the implementation of GCM in our member countries. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I thank you, ADB, and right now I invite ILO and followed by CHCHO. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Noting that labor migration governance is a complex, multidimensional, and it's also transnational in nature, bilateral, sub-regional, regional, and international cooperation and partnership are all essential. These partnerships need to be broad and inclusive, bringing together governments, workers, and employer organizations, international organizations, CSOs, and other stakeholders in dialogue, decision-making, and implementation. Here, I would like to highlight the critical role of regional groupings, including ASEAN, SAARC, and the Pacific Island Forum. The ASEAN Committee on the Implementation of the ASEAN Declaration on Protection and Promotion of the Rights of Migrant Workers is responsible for the implementation of the 2017 ASEAN Consensus on the Protection and Promotion of the Rights of Migrant Workers and its corresponding action plan. By the end of 2024, 23 important projects, including the annual ASEAN Forum on Migrant Labor, had been implemented, with another 5 projects in the pipeline for 2025. Another positive development is the 2023 adoption of the South Asian Qualification Framework, developed with ILO and Swiss government support under the SAARC Plan of Action for Cooperation on Matters Related to Migration. This establishes an important framework to facilitate harmonization of skills qualifications at the regional level, and also to enhance the recognition of the skills of migrant workers from South Asia in destination countries. Meanwhile, the Pacific Island Forum provides the architecture for Pacific-wide cooperation. 2023 saw the adoption of the Pacific Regional Framework on Climate Mobility to addresses climate-related migration through inclusive and collaborative regional approaches. Since 2017, the Pacific Labor Mobility Annual Meeting provides an important forum to advance cooperation on labor mobility across the Pacific. Since the last review, the region has continued to see developments in workers' and employers' organizations' cooperation related to labor migration. The ASEAN Trade Union Council and the South Asian Regional Trade Union Council are important bodies that represent the voices of workers in migration processes in their respective subregions. Likewise, the ASEAN Confederation of Employers, ACE, ensures that employers' positions are voiced in ASEAN processes and dialogues. And since 2016, ACE and ATUC meet regularly in bipartite processes. And let me end my remarks by drawing your attention to the 2022 Singapore Statement adopted by ILO constituents from the Arab states and Asia Pacific. Among others, this statement calls for enhancing labor migration policies and notes the importance of strengthening governance frameworks and respect for freedom of association to protect the rights of migrants. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, ILO. And because we still have the long list of speakers, so please respect for 2-minute speech. And now may I invite CHOHO because of the written. And followed by Kasnipal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As laid out in Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, all human beings, regardless of one's migration status, are born free and equal in dignity and rights, including the right to equality and freedom from discrimination. However, like in other regions, migrants in Asia and the Pacific continue to face immediate forms of racism, xenophobia, and discrimination. Such hostilities exacerbate the human rights challenges they already face in their countries of origin, in transit and destination, pushing them further into vulnerable situations. Discrimination is not only one of the root causes of migration, but it also impacts their lives throughout their journey. Harmful narratives not only affect the human rights of migrants, but they also undermine the legitimate work of migrant human rights defenders and harm society more broadly. As a leading UN entity in the defense of human rights, OHHR has been contributing to the implementation of GCM, including Objective 17, to counter harmful narratives while ensuring the protection of freedom of expression. One such example is OHHR's Stand Up for Migrants campaign, through which we work to neutralize harmful narratives and promote inclusive societies built on shared values and infused with stories of hope. In the Asia-Pacific region, we have applied behavior science to design narrative change initiatives in the Pacific, Southeast Asia, and South Asia. Our research in these countries reveals that those who are strongly opposed to migration represent only a minority of people. In other words, the majority of people have the potential to become supporters of the human rights of migrants if we approach them through appropriate messengers with message that resonates with them. Based on the research insights, OHCHR developed the Migrant Story campaign in Australia, the Daridapu campaign in Malaysia, and Our Stories campaign in India. We made our methodology and knowledge from these campaigns publicly available in the publication Building Human Rights-Based Migration Narratives to support partners who are interested in developing similar initiatives. We invite states and all stakeholders to join us in building a big tent for human rights-based narratives on migrants and migration. Thank you.
Yeah, I thank you so much, OHCHR. And as I see no other requests from intergovernmental organizations and United Nations entity, I will now open the floor for intervention from the representative or stakeholders, started by AMCAS Nepal and followed by Rural Oriented Youth Movement Nepal.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates
2
and
minutes,
colleagues.
please.
Yes, it is a privilege to have this opportunity to speak in this platform. I am Advocate Sadiksha Moharjan from AMCAS Nepal, an organization for, by and of returning women migrant workers based in Kathmandu, Nepal. We are also a member of MFA. While we acknowledge the progress made in implementing the GCM, persistent challenges demand urgent action. First, in terms of evidence-based policy making, migration data remains incomplete and underutilized. Too often, data collection focuses solely on remittances while neglecting crucial statistics on violence, undocumented migrants, and climate migrants, among others. To truly safeguard migrants, we must systematically collect, protect, and integrate comprehensive data into policy making. Let us not forget that no migrant is illegal or irregular. It is policies that push migrants into irregular situations. Until and unless we include undocumented migrants in the data we collect, we can never streamline them in policies that are made or that are yet to be implemented. Second, we realize that the ratification of key international conventions, especially C189, C102, C190, C181, International Convention on Migrant Workers, and others remain alarmingly slow, which is why we keep repeating these challenges. Governments participating in GCM discussion must not offer mere promises, but instead make concrete time-bound commitments to adopt and implement these frameworks. Third, let us not forget migrant families, youth, and their participation when we talk about migrants, as highlighted in the high-level panel as well, that youths and children are left out in these policies while we are the one to live with it. Therefore, migrants' families must be recognized, youth must be organically engaged, and capacity-building initiatives should strengthen migration governance across Asia and the Pacific. Fourth, we urge to strengthen bilateral agreements and that it should mandate a minimum wage, access to welfare center in destination countries, portable social protection, and the need of inclusion of trade unions and CSOs in the agreement drafting process as well. Finally, migrant participation in governance must extend beyond symbolic representation. It must include decision-making power to shape the policies that directly impact their lives. They must have the right to organize, that is freedom of association and assembly. Let us move beyond these discussions toward actionable commitments to ensure migration remains safe and orderly. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thank you, AMCAS Nepal, and now Rural Oriented Youth Movement Nepal have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am Lubaraj Neupane, Executive Director of ROIM Nepal. While Nepal contributes just 0.2% of global greenhouse gas emission, it is the fourth most vulnerable countries in the world to climate change. Climate change-induced migration is a serious issue with numerous consequences. Now, migration is not becoming a choice. Many people are forced to unwillingly leave and go away. And this is not an easy process because it involves lots of challenges. A recent study carried out by ROIM Nepal, covering over 800 households, reveals that a significant majority of respondents, that is 75.88%, reported migrating due to various environmental factors, highlighting the critical role of climate change. It is said that climate-related disasters will drive 1.3 million people in Nepal to leave their homes and migrate by 2050, which is more than 3 times of current trend. This is our regional phenomena too. Climate mobility is characterized by different human rights issues, including uncertainty, social stigma, loss of right to identity, right to property, occupational and livelihoods. The people who are already vulnerable are becoming more vulnerable and at risk of trafficking, trap of undocumented migration, different forms of violation due to climate-forced migration. This is more adverse to those who are marginalized, including women, young people, and socio-economically underprivileged. We all in the region have formulated and in the process of formulation of migration policies, laws, and master plans, also in line with developing the GCM implementation guidelines. However, we observe that these policies are lagging behind to address the additional and specific issues of climate-forced migrants. Hence, we urge all the stakeholders that these policies need to be reviewed and provisioned how they can influence or integrate to the climate-related policies, including NAPA or LAPAs. This regional review of GCM implementation should review the implementation status of Paris Agreement for migrant workers. This should also create a pathway to review climate policies of our respective countries and their intersection to migrant population. As almost 25% of GDP is contributed by the remittances sent by the migrant workers, let's look at how those loss and damage funds can be channeled for the migrant workers. Now, this is not only the time of policy formulation, but also a prime time of policy cohesion. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for speakers. And now, Pakistan United Worker Federation and Women in Migration Network, please, your floor. And followed by indigenous people major group.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Duresh Ahbar, Regional Vice President, Board Member with Women in Migration Network. ITUC is the member of Women in Migration Network and represent trade unions in the network. At the Asia Pacific Regional Review of the Global Compact for Migration in Bangkok, we as trade unions and feminist advocates reaffirm our demands for fair, gender-responsive migration policies that uphold the rights and dignity of all migrant workers, especially women in migration who continues to face systematic discrimination, exploitation, and violence. The Women in Migration Network has been at the forefront of advocating for the human rights of migrant women in all the diversity, from negotiating the UN Global Compact for Migration to shaping gender-responsive indicators for its implementation. Women continues to champion a bottom-up intersectional feminist approach to migration policy. Today, we call on government, UN agencies, trade unions, and civil society to take immediate action and commit to recognize and formalizing care work through the ratification and enforcement of ILO Conventions 189, 190, ensuring protection against exploitation and violence, ensuring labor rights for all migrant women workers regardless of status by implementing ILO core labor standards, including social protection, collective bargaining rights, and freedom of association, especially for temporary and climate-displaced migrant workers. Developing right-based legal migration pathways, including access to citizenship, family unity, and protection for undocumented workers. Decriminalizing migration and redirecting funding from enforcement to community-led support systems, enforcing protection for migrant workers in conflict zones, halting deployments to such areas, and ensuring domestic workers' safety, access to humanitarian aid, and protecting from trafficking. Addressing intersectional barriers based on race, ethnicity, caste, class, country of origin, disability, religion, sexual orientation, and gender identity. Centering the leadership of migrant women in policy making, advocacy, and implementation at all levels. While much debate resolves around how AI is replacing work, we are, though, not concerned with what AI is doing. We are concerned with how we can increase the value of care work. The global economy continues.
The time is over.
Okay.
Thank you so much, and I apologize for the time.
Thank you.
And thank you, speakers. And now I invite the indigenous people major group to have a floor, and followed by Asia Pacific Forum on Women Law and Development.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This statement is delivered on behalf of the Indigenous Peoples Major Group and the Indigenous Peoples International Center for Policy Research and Education. Asia is home to almost 2/3 of the world's indigenous peoples' population and represent about 19% of the world's poor and remain especially vulnerable to displacement, violence, and human rights abuses. Factors such as land dispossession, loss of livelihood, conflict, poverty, natural disasters, climate change, and the search for better economic opportunities drive indigenous peoples to migrate to urban areas and overseas. The impact of migration to indigenous peoples and their communities is immense, as migration disconnects indigenous peoples from their lands and community to which their identity is rooted in. Addressing the root cause of migration is important for indigenous peoples, as many who are working overseas are hoping to one day be able to go back to their communities. The lack of data disaggregation by ethnicity on migration data makes the situation of indigenous peoples invisible when drafting policies and programs targeted to migrant workers and their families. We have the following recommendations. Integrate data disaggregation by ethnicity in data collection for states and relevant agencies to be able to craft appropriate programs and policies to address the specific concerns and needs of indigenous migrant workers, but more importantly, the root cause of migration for indigenous peoples. Integrate indicators developed and proposed by migrants themselves, civil society organizations, and networks to ensure more inclusive and substantive monitoring of the implementation of the GCM. Strengthen the recognition of and legal protections for indigenous peoples, especially in their home countries. In particular, ensure the implementation of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples as a way to minimize drivers of migration. Let us turn our words into action and our commitments into tangible change. Thank you.
I thank you so much. And my last speaker is Asia Pacific Forum for Women Law and Development. So please, your floor.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates and colleagues, I am Sharda from the Asia Pacific Forum on Women Law and Development, and I'm honored to speak here. When we talk about collecting and using accurate data as a basis for policymaking, it is essential to move away from the perspective that migrants are merely objects of this data collection and not the drivers of it. We must recognize the political nature of methods. Knowledge and method is neither separated from researchers or politics and beliefs, nor from the structures in which we operate, which are gendered, racialized, embedded with meaning from globalizing and colonial practices. In this context, we would like to share our good practices by using Feminist Participatory Action Research, or FPAR, as a tool, which comprehensively addresses migrants' issues from their perspective and collects robust data using comprehensive research principles. Through FPAR, we aim to achieve structural changes, amplify women's voices, while ensuring it is owned by the community. FPAR takes an intersectional approach, aims to shift power, and builds the capacity of all. FPAR fosters collective action and is based on established principles of free, prior, and informed consent, prioritizing safety, care, and solidarity. Our FPAR has spanned several countries in the region, and our resilient community of young women migrants has engaged with various stakeholders to drive evidence-based policy changes. Over several years, our FPAR, led by grassroots women's rights communities and organizations, has been calling for member states to ensure that access to decent work, basic services, social protection, and sustainable reintegration for women migrants are all non-negotiable and form part of basic human rights of migrants. Legal protection and access to justice, including the abolishment of restrictive laws and policies that pose barriers to mobility, using the full force of the criminal legal system against migrants, is necessary. Women migrants' human rights must be respected and upheld to address deep-rooted structural causes of migration, which are ultimately inseparable from the neoliberal development model, which overrides the state obligation to respect, protect, and fulfill human rights and comply with international human rights and labor standards. Thank you.
I thank you so much. As I see no more speakers, I would like to thank the moderator, panelists, and delegates for their active participation, and please respect the time limited. The meeting has now concluded. Its deliberation under agenda item 3. I now like to draw your attention to the draft decision as proposed in document ESCAP/GCM/2025/2, which read as follows. The participant in the second Asia Pacific Regional Review of Implementation of the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration called upon the Secretariat of the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific and other members of Regional United Nations Network on Migration for Asia and the Pacific within their respective mandates to continue to support members and associate members of the Commission in the implementation of the Global Compact of Migration in the context of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, following whole of government and whole of society approaches. Before I open the floor, I would like to remind all delegation that the draft decision has been edited by the professional editor of the Secretariat and will be edited again after adoption. Therefore, I would like to request delegation to leave the grammatical aspect to the Secretariat and focus on the substantive element. Can we take it that the meeting agree on the above decision? Would any delegation wish to intervene, especially if the text proposal? No. No. Maybe can go. I have no see and any intervention. So I request that the Secretariat include the text. No, we do not have the text convened, from the any government. So the draft decision of the draft report to be considered on Thursday. On Thursday. So thank you so much. So now I would like to draw your attention to the draft decision as proposed in document ESCAP/GCM 2025/3, which read as follows. The participant in the second Asia Pacific Regional Review of Implementation of the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration call upon the Secretariat of the Economic and Social Commission for the Asia and the Pacific and other members of the Regional United Nations Network on Migration for Asia and the Pacific within their respective mandate to continue to support members and associate members of the Commission in building capacity and reporting on the implementation of migration-related sustainable development goals at the regional and global level. Can we take it that the meeting agree to the above decision? Would any delegation wish to intervene, especially on the text proposed? No, maybe not. So as I see no government delegation raised their flag, I request that the Secretariat included the text of this draft decision in the draft report to be considered on Thursday. This concludes the consideration under agenda item 3. Thank you. We will now continue with agenda item 4, other matters. It is my pleasure to report on behalf of the Bureau on the status of credential or representative of members to the second Asia Pacific Regional Review of Implementation of the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration in accordance with Rule 12 of the Rules of Procedure of the Commission. The Chair and Vice Chair of the Second Asia Pacific Regional Review of the Implementation of the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration examines the credential or representative of 29 member states submitted in the accordance with Rule 11 of the Rules of Procedure of the Commission and found them to be in order. May I take it that it is the wish of the participant in the meeting to take note of the report of the chair and the vice chair? I see no objection. It is so decided. Are there any other matter that delegation would like to the meeting to consider? I see no request for the floor. Thank you, distinguished delegates. If any intervention. Distinguished delegates, thank you for such productive deliberation. The Secretariat will prepare a report of the meeting for our review by midday tomorrow, noon, Thursday, 6 February 2025. The report will be posted on the meeting's website. Kindly note that the report of the meeting will be procedural in nature. The chair's summary will be drafted and circulated to members and associate members 1 week after the meeting for fact-checking in consultation with the chair. The meeting will resume tomorrow, 6 February 2025 at 14 hours in ESCAP Hall to consider agenda item 5 adoption of the report of the meeting. I look forward to your participation tomorrow. I now invite the Secretariat of the meeting to make a relevant announcement, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. Excellencies, distinguished delegates. First, you see on the screen the evaluation survey, which we would like you to respond to, and it is very important that we receive your feedback to improve on how we conduct these meetings. If you cannot access a QR code, please come to the Secretariat and we will provide you with the website link or a printout copy. Tomorrow morning, there will be a special event in CR2 from 9 to 10:45 on regional and sub-regional priorities and partnerships for migration in Asia and the Pacific. The event is organized by ESCAP, IOM, and other members of the regional network and promises to be very interesting in bringing together some of the discussions we have heard over the last 2 days. Following the special event in the morning, side events will be held from 11 to 12:15 and from 12:30 to 1:45 in meeting rooms A, F, G, and H on level 1, and in the theater on the ground floor. We look forward to seeing you at the special event and the side events tomorrow. The plenary session with the adoption of the report on the meeting will resume at 2 p.m. Bangkok time here in ESCAP Hall. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. And I wish you a good evening and a good rest. The meeting is now adjourned. Thank you so much.